Sunday, June 14th, was Flag Day, Trump's 80th birthday, and the birthday of the U.S. Army. But it's not the Army's 250th anniversary. That was last year. Before there was a nation, there was an army. Outnumbered, underarmed, sick, hungry, and often shoeless, fighting for a country that did not yet exist. And if not for them, never would. That's why I proudly proclaim, I am a soldier. Happy 251st birthday, Army. But it saddens me to see how misused and abused our Army and all our military are today. Obviously, this is nothing new, and a story as old as David in the Bible, having a brave soldier sacrificed because he coveted the soldier's wife. Put Uriah at the front of the fiercest battle and withdraw from him so that he may be struck down and killed. Samuel 11:15. Marine General Smedley Butler, World War I double Medal of Honor recipient when you could get to, famously declared, "War is a racket," meaning all wars are. Vietnam, GWAT, Iraq twice, Ukraine, and now Iran certainly bear this out. And anyone who has worked for the big G, like me, knows the war racket is a result of corrupt government, run by cheats and liars, those who would never serve nor soldiered, fallen men. So why does Trump's brash birthday bash bother me so much? It's the pettiness of it, the lack of class, the absence of dignity. Honor guards, actual fighting men, standing at attention to honor UFC players. That's right, I said players, as in you play judo. Real warfighters demeaned by standing at attention for sports competitors. I'm sure to hear from the tough talker crowd now. I always do. The BJJers and MMAers, not all. I've known and even trained some of both, who were good, polite competitors, as well as fellow martial artists. Not them, the tough talkers. But tough talkers aren't. If they were, they wouldn't be talking. They'd just go. I always heard from them from the safety of the net. From 1990 to 2020, I was in my dojo as advertised, widely, 3 times a week, 3 hours at a time. In all those years, one guy showed up to fight me. I declined. Whether I won or lost, he or I could have been crippled, maimed, or killed. There was no reward nor reason. But he could have ignored my refusal, come charging across the mat, and see what happened. See if he lost an eye, got his throat crushed, or his knee broken. Why? Because I go all the way or not at all. And that brings me to the combat sports crowd. Problem is, there's no such thing. It's kind of like the non-binary bullshit. Doesn't exist. There's combat and there's sports. They are not the same. Not even the same universe. There's a world of difference between the fighting and winning, competing and killing, death and defeat. Take a quiet little Audie Murphy and a big, loud Hulk Hogan in the artificial rule-ground environs of the ring. Hogan clearly wins the match. In a fight to the death, I'd bet on Murphy, and so would you. In the same way patriotism is being confused with jingoism. The perfect analogy is the Washington Monument reflecting pool, now covered in algae and scum, no longer reflecting the monument, nor anything for that matter, because Trump canceled the funding for the reflecting pool's water purification. Instead, we get a big, crass UFC tent on the White House lawn, motorcycle jumps, and UFC fights. I remember when I first visited there. It was quiet, and there was a residue of reverence for the ordinary men and women that had been there before and did extraordinary things from there. Now we have a show. The bread and circuses analogy is inescapable. Like the Roman before her, our republic is fallen, like Rome's replaced by empire. And again, like Rome, the empire is failing. Real deeds of valor and sacrifice replaced with fake spectacle. But none of this is new, none unique. Sir John Glubb was a British Army officer and historian who played a significant role in World War II, in campaigns in Iraq, Syria, and as well in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. When Glubb retired to England, he became a prolific author, publishing nearly 20 books on the Middle Eastern history and military affairs. But he is best known for his 1976 essay, The Fate of Empires, in which he analyzed historical patterns of imperial rise and fall, famously noting that major empires tend to last approximately 250 years, or 10 generations. before collapsing into decadence and weakness. 250 years. America is about to celebrate her 250th birthday. We are where Glubb said all empires fail and fall. Glubb was right, and we are there. Retired SOCOM soldier, ex-DEA and DIA agent and officer, betrayed and saved, rejected and redeemed, failed and forgiven. Now repurposed as teacher, truth teller, and chaplain. Welcome. I'm Jeff Prather, and this is the Prather Point. Hey, lots to cover today. Really looking forward to it. Got a very special guest. Want to jump into that. Wanted to give you that commentary. That's on my new Substack. You can subscribe to that at jeffreyprather.substack. I believe some of them are free. All my sermons are free. They're also on christchaplaincy.com, and some of my Substacks are paid. But also, please support all of my sponsors. If you want to support me, then support them, because they keep my Prather podcast free after all these years. And that is a big help to me. So go to beready123.com, beready123.com. Use the promo code Prather for 10% off any purchase. You don't have to get an Iridium 9555 satellite phone like you see there over my shoulder sitting there. You can, but you can get things like this great backpack that has not only EMF-proof compartments, but it also has ballistic level 2 protection in it. I really like this. This is very similar to something I designed and patented years ago that didn't go anywhere. So go to, and they've got generators, they've got EMF beanies, anything you could want. So please go to beready123.com, beready123.com, and support my sponsors there as well. So big show today. What's the deal on the Iran deal? Well, let me get into that first. So yes, I know this is like deal 40, but this is probably actually going to go through. And there's a reason for that. So, of course, my point of view and many others' point of view is that we have been snookered into this war by the Israelis, but Netanyahu, not all the Israelis, not all the Jews, the Zionists, the greater Israelists. I've talked about that in detail. And that was because they very much supported Trump getting elected. Now, Jared Kushner, total Jewish Zionist, and his wife just converted with their Epstein Island, I've talked about that before, was the mastermind of the first election. And so he owes them a lot. But it looks like he was on a timetable. And that timetable was the elections. And the issue with the elections coming up is this Iran war is extremely unpopular. Israel is now the most hated country on the earth, and everybody's learning the truth about Israel and all the terrible things they are doing. And so what's going to happen? And so the one thing that politicians pay attention to is re-elections and polls. And so finally, somebody has gotten Trump's attention and said, hey, if you keep this up, and then, of course, this is my thesis on what's happening. If you keep this up, not only are you going to lose your legacy, which really he was establishing as the most popular and most outside president in the first term, in his first term, and everybody's going to forget that, where we were all very happy that he was in there, and we were all very sympathetic that he was being persecuted. You know, I was very sympathetic because he was persecuted much worse than I was. I was never even charged. I was just slandered. I was certainly never convicted, but I could identify with that. I could identify that with General Flynn as well. But his second term is what people will remember him for. And so he is losing his legacy. He has got a lot of ego. He wants to maintain his legacy. And the other thing is his party is going to lose all of their seats because people are realizing, well, why should I vote for rhinos who get rid of Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene because they're just like the demon rats. In fact, they're actually worse because they profess to be on our side and they are not. The demon rats at least are open about it, that want to castrate our children and bring in pedophilia. And by the way, why do they want to bring in pedophilia? Well, there was just a story on on Alex Jones, which I published on Patreon. It's funny because Patreon let me publish this one, where an African migrant tries to kidnap a little white girl on her way to school as the global war on whites intensifies. And this one, Patreon let me, and of course, please subscribe to my Patreon. That's a big supporter for me as well. So you can subscribe to me at Locals, jeffreyprather.locals.com for $9 a month or $90 a year. And you get basic curated news stories. Or for greater detail, the same thing at the $5 rate, or special resources at the $15 rate, or $25 daily training videos and classes with me online. It's patreon.com/jeffreyprather. But it's funny because lots of times I want to publish something on Patreon and they won't take the URL. Well, they took this URL. And the reason why they took this URL, because a lot of times they won't take Alex Jones and pointing out that rich whites are being attacked, is because why are rich whites elites constantly and consistently importing pedophiles and criminals into their countries? And it's the same reason why this is getting published. It's called a dangle in spook talk. Look at the poor black pedo, not at the rich white one. And that's what you will always see happening. And so that's important to realize, that we're still seeing this pedophilia from the top at the top. So that's important to recognize. But also got to bring up this FBI plot that was foiled in front of the White House lawn at the UFC event. And so massive domestic terrorism plot against the UFC freedom thwarted by the FBI. Or was it another setup? A plan to slaughter Americans at the celebration of America was reportedly built around a simple piece of logic. Hit the buildings, panic the crowd, herd the fleeing survivors into the crosshairs of a waiting sniper team. Wait, sniper team? Wait a minute. Sniper team, that brings up Charlie Kirk, that brings up Butler, all of that. And of course, I have done deep dives on all of those. I just had a former Secret Service on, and he agreed with me. They were all inside jobs. And of course, I just had John Bray on about Charlie Kirk, about the exploding microphone. People were very pleased with that. But see, they say sniper team. So I think that's a tell to what this is about. And according to Fox News, faux news there, the UFC Freedom 250 was the target, dreamed up, not motivated by the usual foreign banners. These were homegrown terrorists. They don't say who. And they say there was a second wave that was intended to storm the White House and get itself. Well, second wave, to me, second wave means a large military organization. That means you got a lot of guys. So then my question becomes, wow, if this is a big organization, then how come the FBI hasn't infiltrated it before? Because they infiltrate everything. Or why haven't we heard anything about this? And so they said they got on the iPhone, picked up 23 Signal users. But after expert analysis of the 3 POTUS assassination attempts and the Kirk killing cover-up, combined with Trump and BIBI now turning on each other, pattern analysis indicates that this was just another act and part of the show. Also, Patreon happily published this. And again, now we hear Trump and BIBI going at each other, and we hear the Israelis now bad-mouthing Trump, and Trump realizing, gee, I'm not the Messiah they thought I was. And they're just abandoning him. Why? Because he's coming to the end of his term, and he's becoming very ineffective politically for their interests. So who wins in this Iran war? Well, Iran clearly wins. They've suffered terribly. We don't know how many casualties, but lots of casualties. And economically, they've suffered. And there is some criticism that I want to clear up, as I understand it, that Trump is giving them money like Obama did. And really, it's not him giving them money. It is him unfreezing their assets in world banks around the world, which is similarly what Obama did. But because they were blockaded everywhere, he could not give them the monies. So that's why he flew the cash, although it still looks like a drug deal to me. And of course, that goes back to Iran-Contra, which I was involved in back in the day, where we were arming the Contras. We were arming Iran to pay for the Contras, while the CIA was running cocaine into black neighborhoods. But the point is that Trump feels, I think, that he has fulfilled his requirements to his donor class, the Israelis, but he's got to worry about his own legacy. Number one, he's got to worry about the Republican Party. Number two, and the Israelis, of course, don't care about either. They're just going to use up Trump. They're going to use up the Republicans. They don't care at all about it. So Israel has won in the fact that they've taken greater Israel territory while genociding Gaza and genociding Lebanon. They don't intend to give it up. And of course, they're going to sabotage this. How might they sabotage this? Well, I'm just speculating at the moment as an intelligence officer, but I'd say another assassination attempt is very likely. Maybe this FBI thing was real. I don't think so, but it could be real. But that doesn't really help them either, because, of course, like with Charlie Kirk, people are going to look to Israel immediately because Trump has started to badmouth BIBI for the first time. So Israel is losing, even though they've got grounds. They don't know how to negotiate with anybody. And, there was some kid recently who, didn't want to work for a Jewish guy because he said they're not nice people. And I can generally tell you that from, being with my wife's family when we would go to synagogue or go to something, is they'd say, hey, so-and-so's going to join the IDF. I'm like, don't join the IDF. You're an American. Join the American Army. No, I would never think of joining the American Army, but I'm going to go join the IDF. Well, that's not patriotism. That's treason. You should move to Israel and be an Israeli citizen, but not a dual citizen. You cannot serve two masters. And also, you walk into a synagogue, you walk into a lot of churches, you're welcome. Somebody says hi. Walk into a synagogue, you're not really welcome very much. And I'm coming in with kippah on and talit, doing all the right stuff. I'm just telling you how it is. Because there is this elitism, which is racism, that they are the superior race, just like the Nazis, and everybody else is inferior, particularly the Gazans, who are animals, but everyone is goyim, is inferior to them. That's not the Jewish attitude, that's the Zionist attitude. It's different. Zionism is political, Judaism is a religion, although it really has changed anyway. But, I'm ticking off everybody today. I'm ticking off the MMA guys, I'm ticking off the BJJ guys, ticking off the Zionists. So, I expect my audience to grow smaller, but I'm going to tell you the truth always as best as I understand it. But what does this mean? This means that the strait will likely open. So Trump says, I opened the strait. Well, he can take his barricade away, the blockade away. The Iranians are the ones that really have to unblockade their blockade. And they probably will. But Trump realizes now, if he keeps this up, the shortages are going to hit America soon. And the cost of oil and the cost of gas and diesel are going to go way up. Plus, there's going to be shortages. Anything made of plastic is through diesel. So that means your food, your meats, your medicine bottles, all of that. And so this is why the Iranians don't really need a nuclear weapon. They've got a global strategic weapon already. It's the Straits. And so Trump has finally figured it out. And he was on a timetable with the Israelis to defeat Iran. And he did not listen to American intelligence. He did not listen to Joe Kent, who I've had on the show. And I think he was in a special mission unit. I was in the predecessor unit. Super guy. Didn't listen to Gabbard. Any of the intelligence agencies, there's 16, 17, 18. I don't even know how many there are now. And listen to fake intelligence from Israel about this, and none of it worked out. The first one was, hey, I got an idea. Let's kill Khomeini. So to put that in perspective, if someone was attacking us for Catholic America, hey, I got an idea. Let's kill the Pope. Or, hey, I got an idea. Let's kill Billy Graham. I know Billy Graham's dead now, and his son's worthless, but Billy Graham, I think, was pretty squared away. Let's see how that works out. Is that going to crush resistance or build resistance? Well, of course, it builds resistance. And we don't see any Israeli-Iranian agents in place this time, and they've been famous for being able to do that before. So that's why it looks like this Hormuz oil deal is going to go through. It is for political expediency. Nothing about the Iranian nuclear dust, nothing about Iranian nuclear weapons anymore. Remember, they're like, hey, they've already got it. First, they're going to get them. Netanyahu's been saying that for 20 years. They're 2 weeks away for 20 years. Then it was, they've got them. And now we're not hearing anything about this because this is now the reality of political parties. That's what I think is happening. But we'll ask my guest about that really well. But I also want to mention one more thing from my intro there, because he's an Army veteran as well, fellow soldier and country boy. But there was one MMA fighter that was turned away, and that was, and I don't really follow these guys, but I think his name was Strickland, I think, who was wearing a Trump is in the Epstein files shirt and was thrown off the grounds. And some people have been commenting on my Patreon in particular, like, oh, you're always bashing Trump. I'm like, no, I'm not bashing Trump. I've praised Trump lots of times for the cartel wars. I'm backing that. The tariff stuff against China, I'm backing that. And of course, he's in the Epstein files. I've actually said he's not likely guilty of any of the things that people have said just because he's in the files. In fact, he threw Epstein off Mar-a-Lago when he was pawing some 14-year-old girl. The issue is censorship. The issue is an American citizen MMA fighter who wants to wear a T-shirt that says Trump is in the Epstein files, gets thrown off the White House grounds. That's exactly what we're against. So on X, I get criticism all the time, and if it's logical, rational criticism, I'll respond to. We can debate. If it's just calling me names, and cussing me out, then I'm out of here. Which is what I normally hear from the left, by the way, because they can't make good arguments. But we'll ask my special guest about that. So he is an Army veteran as well. He is also, like me, a law enforcement veteran. He was also a federal air marshal, which means he can shoot some of the toughest shooting courses I've ever seen. And I was a firearms instructor for air marshal courses. When there weren't enough, there's never enough air marshals during global war on terror, and so all other special agents were cross-trained as it. But those are very difficult shooting. Tubular shots are very difficult. So you got aisles, can't shoot the passengers, can't shoot the wings, they're full of fuel, can't shoot the cockpit. So it's a very, of course, contact shots are real important there, but it's a very difficult scenario. So I know he can shoot. I know he's a veteran, and he's also been in law enforcement for a long time. And he's got a special issue that I've published on my Patreon and Locals today. But before we get to that, I'll just see what he has to say about what I've been talking about. Welcoming back to the show, finally, Matt CUBBLER. Welcome back, Matt.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming back. You're on all the big shows, but I think I'm going to flatter myself and say I think we helped you get there back in the day, getting that you were on.
I'm not on any real big shows yet, but you were one of the original guys to platform me, and I'm always appreciative of that. And you've always been very supportive of not just Job's case, but the other cases that I have a little bit of a passion for, namely John Chapman and his family and what's going on with that. So you're a true patriot and a really good friend, and I appreciate that.
Right back at your brother. So we just had on a PJ friend of mine a long time. We were talking all about that as well. And I'm still looking forward to the Howard movie coming out. You don't have any room int on that, do you?
I do. I'm told summer of 27.
Really?
Yeah.
And is it going to tell the truth, or is it going to, or do you know?
I don't know. I know what I've been told, which is it's going to tell the true story of what happened to John.
Wow.
But I don't believe, just my gut, knowing how influential the SEALs are in things, I don't think it's going to be an anti-SEAL movie, more so a pro John Chapman movie. So,
but if it's going to tell the truth, it's going to have to reflect on the SEALs.
Yes, but I just don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to turn it into a bashing of SEALs. I think there's going to be an element of the discontent between the two branches post, especially leading into the Medal of Honor. I would venture to bet, because I know there is someone who is playing a role that's like an amalgamation of multiple people, and that person was part of the MOH review board and like submitting the packet for John and getting all that together. So
really, wow, you are, man. I would love to interview somebody about that one. I know it's pretty secret and everything. And has Slab said anything about this?
No, not that I know of. I know we've been in contact with the Snake, Mitch Hall, who is a retired SEAL officer who has been in the movie biz since he got out, but he's doing a counter documentary to the documentary we're going to end up doing, and counter to the truth of John Chapman being a hero, going back and regurgitating the Medal of Honor lies that the SEALs told during the blocking attempt of John Chapman's Medal of Honor, how there was some random Chechen versus Chechen Taliban fighting Taliban kind of thing.
They start shooting at each other on the mountaintop,
right.
that on the little tiny mountaintop that they've been on for weeks.
Yes, together, knowing each other. Yeah, and so
and SEALs might believe that, because SEALs don't, like us, SEALs don't spend a lot of time on land, knowing, because we are both aware, I think, of the many screw ups of the SEALs on land. They do not have the terrain analysis. The most obvious example, I think, is in the movie, the fake movie Lone Survivor, where the guy goes, false peak. I'm like, false peak? How about reading a map? What are you doing? Holy shit. Unbelievable. False peak.
Well, one thing about this Mitch Hall documentary that is just mind-numbing to me. First of all, I don't even know if it's ever actually going to be. I think they may have been shooting propaganda video content similar to what they did when they created the Redbeard theory back in the Medal of Honor review period. And Redbeard's they called him Redbeard, was a guy that was a Taliban fighter up there that they said is the one that was actually shooting from that same vicinity John Chapman was shooting from. They're saying that was this Redbeard guy. So I don't know if you saw the Sean Ryan episode with Pete Blaber.
I did. I was just going to bring it up because I've been a big Pete Blaber fan. The Mission, the Men, and Me. I love that book. I quote that in one of my intros and extras. Is plans are useless, planning is invaluable. Develop situation before it develops you. But I understand, having come from there, the special forces mentality. I've had on, you can't see it up there now, but there's a Horse Soldier signed bourbon up there. And I've had several of 595, ODA 595, Horse Soldier Green Berets on the show. And they're very reluctant to outright criticize anybody, even though there's a part in Swords of Lightning. I don't know if you've read Swords of Lightning. It's their book. It's great. It's much better than Horse Soldiers because it's their book, where there's Air Force pilots who won't come down low enough. And they're still just it just epitomizes this Green Beret rapport building attitude that I wonder if that is a residue of Blaber there. What are your thoughts?
I think Blaber, first of all, I question anybody that comes out 24 years after an event, and now all of a sudden is given platforms like Sean Ryan's to spin information that, quite frankly, he can't prove and doesn't exist.
Well, it's nonsensical. What he says is nonsensical. Normally he sounds really experienced. Like there's always friendly fire. I'm like, wow, that's really true. That's a great point. But then he starts saying he couldn't raise him on the radio. Well, there's a million reasons why he may not have been able to raise him on the radio.
Right.
I can just reel him off right now. That's ridiculous.
And he talked about seeing all the video from, days after it happened. Well, that's fantastic. But, what was the technology in 2002 and what was the ability to understand who was who in essentially a real-time situation when you're looking at a ISR feed? How do you know at that moment who was who? And he's trying to say from that moment, he knew it wasn't John Chapman who was doing the fighting after he was left to die by the SEALs. And my argument is you can't know that because the technology did not exist, and the knowledge of who was who on that mountain took months and months and months of analysis from, yes, the Air Force, but it's been peer reviewed. It's been debunked multiple times by multiple administrations, the theory of Redbeard. And they're going to come out with we had some screenshots of video that was taken, but it doesn't show anything.
Well,
there's no proof that Redbeard came from where the QRF landed, that helicopter crash landed, to where John Chapman was at the outcrop, the bunker number 1 area. There's no proof that they can't track that movement of Redbeard and say that that's John Chapman, but they can track John Chapman's movement from the minute he stepped off the helicopter until the minute he died.
Well, and this goes into the consistent cover up in SEAL culture and big Navy culture. But before we go there, just let me stop, because we're about to dive in now to this. I think that's a great segue. But first, I've got a great new sponsor. Remember, sponsors keep the Prather Point free. So if you support them, you support me. You got to try masculinemanessentials.com/Jeffrey Prather, code JP10, JP10 for 10% off. The stuff is great. It's about the size of a .203 round. And the bourbon is my favorite because my dad's from Kentucky. It is a natural deodorant, no aluminum in it at all. My wife, that's the first thing she asks, and it lasts all day. It's like a premium cologne, although I don't really know what a premium cologne's like. But that they want me to say that. But it is really good. I personally use it and believe in it. And it's aluminum free, made in America, smells incredible, and it actually lasts all day. masculinemanessentials.com/Jeffrey Prather, 10% off. Use code JP10. Okay, so let's dive into this now. So because your case and what you've uncovered just consistently shows that there is this, there's always bad apples everywhere. There's bad apples in SF, there's bad apples in Delta, there's bad apples everywhere. But it appears in the SEAL culture for a long time that there is this consistent changing failures into successes, like in Lone Survivor, which we all knew about that inside the community from the beginning. Now it's public knowledge. But also, there is a cannibalistic, I guess I would call it, inside the SEALs, where in my time in Special Forces, I was an officer, obviously, but I got along really well with the NCOs, mostly because I listened to them because they were more experienced than me. In private, they would even call me by my first name, not in public. Public could be sir, but if it was just me and my AS2 or something, hey Jeff, whatever. But there seems to be this animosity or cannibalistic, self-destructive attitude that exists within the SEALs. That's what I'm getting from what I'm seeing from the Job Price story. But let's delve into that. And before we get to that, give me a rundown on your law enforcement background, so you have the bona fides to talk about this experientially.
Well, I appreciate that. I was Army Intel, active duty, 204th MI Battalion, 66th MI Brigade in Augsburg, Germany. We were the European Theater Tactical Intel Unit, doing real-time intelligence. Very few intelligence units were doing real-time intelligence collection throughout the entire time. So we weren't doing, there's stateside intel units were doing a lot of just running scenarios. Ours was actual intelligence that we were collecting on a daily basis. Did that until I got out in 1993, became a cop in the end of 93. I was a cop until I retired in 2023. During that time, I was SWAT, I was patrol, did undercover narcotics. And then shortly after 9/11, I was hired as one of the original ramp-up hirings within back then it was the Sky Marshal program. Before 9/11 became the Federal Air Marshal Service.
So let me just stop you there. So usually there's like raid guys and there's undercover guys. So I obviously was a raid guy because I got the man written on my forehead. I was not the undercover guy. So when Matt says he did both, that shows a breadth of diversity that is kind of unusual. And then the other thing that I want to comment on is when the Sky Marshals stand up after 9/11, it is a very elite organization. It is a lot of ex-tier 1 guys coming in, real shooters. It's not so much that now, but at that time it was very elite. The Federal Air Marshal qualification standards are still very difficult. So go ahead.
Yeah, the I don't know the exact number. It's classified of how many people they hired after 9/11, but it's around 4,000, I'm told. And there were over 1 million people that applied for those 4,000 jobs, and I was blessed to be one of the ones that got hired. And they definitely were looking for a specific background, aptitude, physical fitness, critical thinking skills, all those kinds of things, what they're looking for.
And you can shoot.
And you got to be able to shoot, right? And that was one of the hardest things for me. Was I was a great shot coming in, but learning a whole new grip on the gun, a whole new presentation, everything was just everything was different. I just had to break a lot of muscle memory things and create new muscle memory during the training period in Artesia, New Mexico. And I worked with some of the best of the best. And if anybody saw Black Hawk Down, Hoot, the guy that Eric Bana played, Norm Hooten, was the head of our training, and got to learn from him and a lot of other guys that were just top notch.
Legends, giants in their field.
Yeah. Oh, legends, absolutely.
Yeah, I know you always got to pull back so that the Stockholm syndrome and the passengers don't grab your gun. Every time that was a signature of FAMs as well. And then I think you were shooting SIG 357s, weren't you?
Yeah, 229, 357. Yeah. And the original shooting program was the TPC, which was basically you had to shoot for your pay. Like you brought in at a certain pay band, and if you wanted to elevate your pay band, you had to get a certain score on your TPC, and that was, from concealment, draw and fire in 1.65 seconds, 1 round, center mass from 7 yards. Like those, doing that multiple times, doing multiple targets, doing back facing, forward facing, lateral. It was a very intense program, and the pressure of money, right? I want to make more money, so that pressure to be great, and I think that was part of the psychology of what they were trying to do too.
Yeah, that pressure. That's funny because I saw, when I went to DA fireman school, a lot of guys drop out, and shooting the one-handed bullseye course on your own is one thing. Shooting it under pressure where you're going home, all of a sudden that eliminates a lot of people. But the firearms training action scenarios for the FAMs, for the Federal Air Marshals, were some of the hardest. You got to turn around over your shoulder in your pilot seat and shoot, and then the blood would spatter. That was some tough stuff, I'll tell you. So anyway, I just wanted to establish your bona fides there. So let's delve into now Commander Joe Price's story and your relationship, and tell that tale, please.
Well, I was on, for anybody who wants to come back and watch old episodes of your show, I was on the show talking about this before, but at a phase, the stage in the investigation where I wasn't as far along as I am today. Joe Price was Commander of SEAL Team 4, was found dead in his bunk on December 22nd, 2012 in Tarankota, Afghanistan, while he was deployed as the commander of SEAL Team 4. He was ruled a suicide by the Navy, and for the better part of 7 years, his family questioned it, tried to do things on their own to try to get clarity and maybe some more answers to some questions they had about what happened to him, with very little success. So I went to high school with Joe. We graduated together. We weren't friends in the sense that we hung out after school or anything, but we were very friendly in class. And we were both on a military academy track. So we were all in the same college preparatory classes, all 4 years of high school. So I knew him well in that environment. In 2019, his sister and father asked me to take a look at the case. They handed me what they had as far as evidence, which was a 3-ring binder with like 356 pages in it of statements and reports and military documents. And
this is not uncommon, by the way. I had the same thing. I had a warrior school medic. He had been a corpsman, a Navy corpsman with the Marines in Fallujah. He had a lot of PTSD, but Tucson police shot him, and the parents came to me as well. So this is not that unusual to happen when you have an investigative background.
And I knew his sister. My brother died when I was 18 in a car accident, and so he was my only sibling. So when Job died, I didn't really know his sister well. She was a couple years younger than me, but I just reached out to her on Facebook and said, "Hey, I kind of can understand the loss of an only sibling, and if you ever need to vent, talk, whatever, I'm available." So that kind of started a friendship that lasted up until today still, but it grew to the point where she could trust me. And, I'm not NYPD blue, I'm a small town cop from Pennsylvania originally. And, so I didn't have the same, people didn't look at small town cops the same way they would some big city detective, while the reality is that the job is the job. There's no more knowledge that someone from a big city has than me. I've been all the same schools they've been to. It's just a matter of frequency and volume, right? So I was very confident in my ability to do things. So when they asked me to take a look at it, I made a promise to the dad. I said, "Here's the deal. I'm going to be honest with you. If I think it's suicide, I'm going to tell you it's suicide. And if I think it's something else, I'll tell you that too." So after a week, I reviewed it, read all the statements, read all the reports, looked at all the crime scene photos that were available in the document, which weren't very good photos, but I could make out certain things that helped me come to the conclusion that I couldn't get to a place where I could rule it suicide. I couldn't decide whether it was anything else, but at that point, with the information I had, I couldn't get to suicide as an investigator. I couldn't, if I were investigating that case with the evidence that they showed me, I could not determine suicide. So that started a 7-year journey that I'm still on today. That has taken a lot of highs and lows and moments of forward progress, and then gigantic brick walls that I run into. But I'm at a place now where I know he was 100% murdered. After shows like yours and others that gave me enough exposure to get on some podcasts that have a pretty wide reach, I was able to get a few viral reels that brought people to see podcasts that I was on where I talked a lot about Job. And that brought forward forensic experts who were fans of the podcast that I was on, who emailed me and asked me if I'd let them look at the information. And at this point in time, this is 2025, early 2025, I now had all the documents I needed to be clear that one, the Navy SEALs committed crimes and covered up a crime. 2, they destroyed evidence and altered evidence. And 3, NCIS is inept. Those 3 things I know for certain. I knew also, based on circumstantial evidence, that Job was murdered. Through interviews.
Let me stop you there, because you said something I don't think you've said before, is the Navy SEALs were in on it.
Yes. So yes, and I'll clarify that in a second. I now know, thanks to multiple forensic experts who reached out to me and reviewed all of the evidence that I had, including the ballistics, all the crime scene photos, the GSR reports, the everything. And they all came back with the same conclusion, that Job Price was murdered. That there's no way it could be a suicide. Certain things about his body. And the thing that, I'll address the SEAL involvement now. The thing that they did that was on layered culpability in this crime is, number one, NCIS left the room unattended for 9 hours with Navy SEALs who had yet to be cleared as suspects. While they went, after he was already found dead, they locked the room, gave the key to the Command Master Chief, Jeff Peeler, and said, "Do not allow anybody in this room," and left. And in law enforcement, you never relinquish control of a crime scene to someone other than the
that's chain of custody. It's
right.
A crime. It's a chain of custody. So are there documents showing that the SEALs had custody?
100%, yes.
So that's really evidence.
It is, and it's evidence that no evidence could be taken from that crime scene.
Yes.
But the minute it becomes an unsecure crime scene, and that anything that was in that room when he was found dead, and then 9 hours later when NCIS came back, you cannot make any type of legal assumption that the contents remained identical to what was found when he was found dead to when they returned. So with that, it's everything changes.
The shell casing is underneath the pillow.
Well, no, the shell casing was underneath his butt. We'll talk about all those things that forensically that can't be what they're saying happened. So they left the crime scene unsecured, therefore ruining any evidence that could be collected in that crime scene. The photographs that they took after returning 9 hours later will become the damning pieces of evidence that they cannot walk back from. Everything else they were able to, whether blame it on ineptitude or war, fog of war, whatever they want to use as an excuse as to why they did something, they can't change the forensics found in these photographs. So after they came back, they processed the crime scene, processed Job's body based on everything I read in the reports, supposedly swabbed his hands for gunshot residue. They bagged his hands, taped them in the crime scene, released the body to Jeff Peeler. His name's going to be very repeated often, and said, get the medical people here and release his body to them, and nobody is to touch his body. It's a crime scene. His body is a crime scene. His body contains evidence. They were preserving evidence by putting bags on his hands.
Which is common.
Yeah. So in the NCIS agent's notes, he puts them there after he told Jeff Peeler not to have it, no one's allowed to touch the body. He said, based on his body language, I did not believe he was going to follow that order. The NCIS agent failed to collect a sheet that was on Job's bed and put it in the body bag, which is customary. Anything that the body was touching would be encapsulated in the body bag so that when it reaches the medical examiner's office, everything can be reevaluated as evidence. So as he's walking into the medical tent, the NCIS agent, he witnesses the medical personnel washing Job's entire body from head to toe, removing the bags from his hands, scrubbing his hands, replacing bags back onto his hands, which is another level of criminal conspiracy to try to hide.
This is the medical examiner. This is not the. This is not.
This is the medical people.
The funeral guy.
No. This isn't even a medical examiner. These are the corpsmen in Afghanistan, hours after Job's body was released to them from his room.
Well, that's inexplicable.
Yeah. Now, the argument is that it is tradition that they do that to give someone who dies in combat an honorable and dignified trip home. They don't want to send him home all bloodied and destroyed.
Right.
That's what they say. But however,
he didn't die in combat.
Right. He was murdered. He was found dead in his bunk, and it was yet to be determined the outcome. They gave their opinion, but if you're going to bag someone's hands as evidence and then expect that to be preserved for when it got back to the medical examiner's office, then you wanted something from his hands to be analyzed or verified through secondary analysis. So the fact they rebagged his hands takes away anything that they could possibly say about Job wanting to give him a dignified transfer. This was 100% trying to hide the fact that they had removed the bags and washed.
So does the NCIS still use the paraffin test for gunshot residue?
I don't know what they, back in 2012, what they used. It just stated there it was swabbed. In the report, it says his hands were swabbed for GSR.
Okay, that was likely the paraffin test. Yes.
Right. So, and that's going to come into play here in a second too. So, Job gets shipped back. They have the autopsy. The autopsy done in Dover, Delaware, says there's a lot of inconsistencies. Like there was clearly some doubt in the ME's mind, but there was no additional evidence that he could see that would prove an outcome other than suicide. But he did note in there that there were a lot of inconsistencies in the timeline of Job's death. The medical examiner, not the medical examiner, the forensic experts that reached out to me. Now, I knew something didn't look right about how he was found in his bed. I knew that the 9 hours was a big problem for me. The fact they washed the body, the fact that nobody heard a gunshot it's called a green mile, which is in his case, it was the command operations center attached to the officers and senior enlisted quarters of that. That's where their bedrooms were. So it was all one long building, separated by a door and a wall.
What
No one.
Typically those deployment, those are kind of haphazard. Sometimes you're in a big open space, but generally that's just plywood. It's not much, right?
Well, it was certainly metal and concrete. I don't know what the walls were made out of, like the partition walls, but it's everybody told me, and everybody that I've ever spoken to that has ever been in a Green Mile for any period of time, it's as echoey as if you fart at one end, someone's going to hear it at the other. Like it's that loud.
Yeah. And the partitions, if you get them, are very flimsy because you either you're in Army bunks or cots, or you're got these little 2x4 bunks that are built.
Right. His was a bunk with like a wooden piece of plywood and then a mattress on top of it.
Yeah.
So no one heard a shot. His gun was found in his hand, loosely in his hand, with his finger still in the trigger. Unsuppressed weapon. His gun couldn't be suppressed. There was no threaded barrel. And the pillow was found over top of his hand with the gun. So one of the forensic things that was able to be determined was that there was no way that his gun could have wound up in the position on his chest and under that pillow naturally. There's some forensic way of proving that the gun was placed in his hand posthumously. Job's head had 3 different dried blood flow patterns, meaning that his head had to be moved at least 2 times in order for blood to go with gravity, right? So when you're sleeping on your left side and you're shot in a 45-degree angle downward from the right side to the left, it's an instantaneous death. And your head, in order for blood to dry, has to remain in one position for a period of time. And blood will only flow in the direction of gravity. So if he had 3 distinct blood patterns on his head, that meant that his head was in 2 other different positions posthumously long enough for blood to flow out and dry. And that was...
It sounds like with the pillow, someone was trying to act like it was a suppressed sound, except that doesn't work very well.
Yeah, no, the pillow was, the positioning of the pillow, what they didn't do, and this is just my deduction, is that when Job was found dead and they wanted it to look like a suicide, they didn't take the time to position the pillow, which he used every night in the crook of his arm and slept with on his left side. And that's where it was found. I don't think they took any time to position the pillow in such a way that it didn't interfere with their desire to put the gun in his hand across his chest. And that it just so happened that they did it underneath the pillow. I don't think the pillow was thought of by them as they were concealing and covering up this crime, that it was going to be as important as it was in today with the forensic analysis. The casing you mentioned earlier was found under his lower back buttocks area. And the only way, based on where he was sleeping, positioning where the wall was behind him, the angle that the gun had to be held in, which then is where the ejection port would be positioned, there's no way that the casing could have ended up under his buttocks unless he was shot while standing up, but we can prove that he was shot while laying on his left side. So that means the casing had to be placed there. There was no, we'll get into the lab testing now. So I talked about the GSR testing they did supposedly during the analysis of his body during the crime scene, swabbing at the NCIS agents. When I finally got, and it took me until 2024, end of 2024, to get the necessary lab testing back, ballistics, DNA, and GSR through FOIA. It took forever, years. But me just getting told you're wrong agency, until I finally landed on the right agency.
What was the right agency, by the way?
The one I sent to first, NCIS. They denied me access. And then ultimately it came back around. I refoiled with them and I got it. Now, I don't know if it was a different person reviewing it or whatever the case might be, but so the GSR testing. So typically when you're doing a GSR test for suicide, you test the hand that was holding the gun. Because of the gases and the powder that blows backwards, there's going to be evidence of that on someone's hand if they've recently fired a gun. And the NCIS agent report says that they did swab his hand. However, the GSR testing that was done and the analysis that was done was not done on any swabbing of his hands. It was done on the sheet that his head was in contact with, or that his body was in contact with, and the wood plank that was underneath his mattress that the bullet nicked when it exited the mattress and hit the. Those are the only two things that were tested for GSR. His hands were never tested, which tells me, as a if I'm a lawyer, if I'm a defense lawyer or a prosecutor, I want to prove one way or the other whether or not someone fired a gun in that room. That's right. The fact is, there's no proof at all that Job fired a gun in his bedroom.
Well, there is a preponderance of the evidence in doubt of that, because they did not include the hands after they had bagged the hands. That the process of the chain of custody of evidence acquisition for the hands was interrupted and destroyed.
Yes,
which indicates sabotage.
And any testing that they said they did before the bagging was either lies, that they never did test it, or they didn't want it tested, so the evidence got misplaced. The swabs got misplaced. Another big thing was the lack of a gunshot being heard, which then you ask, how is it possible anybody cannot hear in a manned, like awake people manned operation center, plus people close by in close proximity sleeping, and these are all seasoned operators, so they understand what a gunshot sounds like. Right. Nobody heard a gunshot.
And if it was everybody asleep, that's one thing, but the talk being there,
and I would argue that if somebody cracks off a 9mm unsuppressed in a concrete metal structure, regardless if they're asleep or not, it's going to wake somebody up, and they may not know what woke them up, but something did. At the autopsy, there was close-up photographs taken of Job's entry wound, which showed a stippling pattern. Stippling is, for those that don't know, is the burning of hair and skin coming from the gas and the gunpowder that comes out of the barrel of the gun. There was a stippling pattern, a complete semicircle, which was the same diameter as the front face of a suppressor. And we've done subsequent testing to replicate the wound that was found on Job's head with a suppressor, and did so every single time. So,
wow,
the fact that Job's gun could not be suppressed, yet there was a stippling pattern of the diameter of the front face of a suppressor, and no one heard a gunshot. I'm confident that Job was shot with a suppressed weapon, which would not be the one that he was found holding in his hand. Which means someone else.
Without the suppressor, there should have been a different signature at the wound.
Yes.
That would have some burning. What should that look like?
It's not going to be as defined, right? So if it's a contact pressure wound, depending on heavy right pressure, heavy left pressure, direct full pressure, that's going to change the. But if you have the flat facing of a 1.5 inch diameter front facing of a suppressor, and you can place that flat, because the barrel is not perfectly round, it is not perfectly flat. There's different, depending on how the gun is designed, changes when you're pressing how much of that front part is actually touching something. So I'm very confident that Job was killed with a suppressor. And then when you think about if Job was shot with a gun that was suppressed and Job's gun was not suppressed and could not be suppressed, then how is it that the ballistics show that the bullet, casing, and gun all belong together? So I try to explain it to people this way. I can go outside and I can shoot a round into a sand pile or a, you do it when you're going into a building. They have to make sure there's no accidental discharge. You put it in, pull the trigger, and make sure there's nothing in the chamber. I can shoot something into anything that I can then retrieve from. I can take that bullet, the casing it expelled, and the gun that shot it, and put it in any place I want to. But that doesn't mean that that gun, casing, and bullet did anything wrong. It just means they were present. And the only analysis that was done to any of those things, his gun, the bullet, and the casing, was DNA on the bullet, which was found in a pile of Job's blood.
And was the bullet the type of bullet that he had in the magazine, in his magazine?
There's absolutely zero reference to any comparison to anything, whether or not he was missing a round in his mag.
Wow.
Nothing.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. There should be, if it was a single, what was it, 45?
9.
A 9, okay. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, there should be
226.
one less or two less. Oh, it was a seal gun. Okay. Yeah.
So if I'm the investigator and I'm trying to determine whether or not a gun was used in the commission of a crime, and I'm able to retrieve the casing and the bullet, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to examine the gun. I'm going to take swabs of the inside of the barrel of the gun, the front face of the gun, and the sides of the gun, and the trigger of the gun. And I'm going to find out what was on those swabs. And if it was a direct contact wound to Job's head, as we know, there would be brain, bone, skin, and hair fragments in his barrel and on his gun. Without a doubt, 100% certain. That was never tested for. The bullet was never tested for any of those things either. It was only tested for DNA because it was sitting in his blood. And the casing was never tested for latent fingerprints to find out whether or not Job actually loaded his own gun. And the latent fingerprint is not conclusive of anything. Anybody could have loaded a mag for him at a range or something like that, but it would have given us at least an idea who loaded that round that was fired in that room, supposedly. You know what I'm saying? So
yes,
none of that was done. And the DNA, the only DNA that was found was Job's DNA. And there was no, because there was no evidence left on his body, there was no way to confirm that he didn't have skin underneath his fingernails or anything that could have been alternative DNA or secondary DNA on his body because it was washed off intentionally at the direction of the Navy SEALs, especially directly from Jeff Peeler. And I will add this, and I said this on Redacted show, and I've said it on others, that Jeff Peeler, who was the Command Master Chief, which is the top NCO, top enlisted guy in the team. He is as close to Job as far as operationally as can be, because he's the one that gets the marching orders and he makes sure that the mission is accomplished. Jeff Peeler was the last one to see him alive, the first one to find him dead, the one that held the key to the room for 9 hours, and the one who ordered the medical team on the fob to wash his body. He's the one that was responsible for all of that. And I believe that his loyalty was to his team, functional team, the operational team, not the command staff. And I believe that after the event happened, which I do not believe Jeff Peeler did, that his job was to make sure that the team was okay in the long run. And I think the plan was very, very solid. It's one that's been done many, many times in many other instances where they destroy evidence in order to not link anyone specifically to a crime. What they didn't do in this case was change forensics based on photographs that were taken of his body and its supposed final resting place.
Well, this is reminiscent of the Tillman cover-up, but there was also, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall, this is what I was getting to. There is this tradition or something of cannibalism in the SEAL teams. Now, I used to work with because there's a Latin American team. I was 7th Special Forces Group, so way back in the day. But there's the instance of where they take the new, I can't remember which team, but it's from Code Over Country, you probably know, where they take the new young SEAL officer and get him with a tranny in some Thai bar, and then he kills himself, and then they cover that up. I mean, that's
Penny. Yeah.
If your officer gets drunk and because he's a kid, you should take care of him. You shouldn't set him up.
Yeah, it was Ensign Penny that I believe that was his name that happened to. And then Melgar.
I was looked after many times by SF NCOs.
And you look at Melgar, I mean, that's that guy that was killed by SEALs.
That's another.
Very similar type of cause and effect. Part of one of the many reasons that Job was killed. And there's many, but the big one, the last one, the one that was I believe created the environment for him to be killed, was a former SEAL Team 6 guy who was kicked out of 6 and was reassigned to 4 to Job's deployment, who had a history of being very rogue in his approach to doing his job, and would take the ASOT money, which was the CIA money that was used for operational type stuff, paying off mullahs and families. If you kill somebody accidentally in a raid or whatever, you pay the family off as an honor payment, things like that. The money was used for a lot of things, but he stole it and used it to buy heroin. And and I know that the CIA was behind all the poppy farms being farmed.
No, ISIS came in and eliminated the poppies by guys with sticks, and DEA, my old agency, couldn't do it because they didn't want to do it. ISIS just had guys out there with sticks. And
the Afghanis were paid to not farm crops and instead plant poppies, and then the poppies were then utilized for whatever the CIA utilized them for. If you look at pre 9/11, the amount of heroin that came from Afghanistan was 1% or less, and by this time when Job died, it was in 2012, probably 93% of the world's population, the world's heroin was being supplied from Afghanistan. Now, I don't have any proof that shows the direct link between the CIA and that, other than what's been publicly reported on it.
Well, I do in my Iran. I started in SF in the 80s with Iran Contra. I end up with Fast and Furious with Niebla Zambada, with the DEA doing a deal with a similar cartel. It's a big circle. So that's what I call the dark economy: drugs, people, and weapons. So no, you don't have any direct proof that that's involved here, but there is this line through the SEAL community of predatory behavior on each other or on their officers, officer corps. What the loyalty is not to the Constitution, not to the Navy, it's to the team. It seems like. Can you elaborate on that concept I'm trying to talk about?
So if you look back all the way back to John Chapman, which I call the original sin. I know Dick Marcinko had a lot of stuff going on in the 80s.
Yeah,
the cartels.
I mean, Beckwith was no saint, and Beckwith was a rogue too, challenging fellow officers in a bar. Junior officers, what are you going to do? Junior officer, the senior officer. But Marcinko, and I've talked to lots of SEALs who knew Marcinko. Marcinko was in a class by himself. He ended up as a convicted felon. I knew lots of SEALs who didn't, appreciate him.
But he stayed. Marcinko, even when he got out, was still very much involved in the culture growth of the SEALs until he died. And he didn't die until, 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. But he was a very, very influential voice in that process. So if you look at Chapman and what happened, and that was the beginning of the GWAT era. That was the start of the SEALs forcing themselves within JSOC to be the lead tier 1 agency, especially within SEAL Team 6. And it created the environment for them to have to create a narrative that was counter to what the truth was, and then hold that narrative for a long period of time. And what they realized is they can control narrative, and using techniques that they developed and perfected over the course of the last 24 years, they were able to make sure that in order to keep people in control, you have to be able to leverage them. There has to be something greater than their own moral code that would keep them from doing the right thing. And when you send SEALs out for 20 plus years and tell them that they're going to go out and kill people and do raids, it's going to be, I think you're froze there, Jeff. Maybe I'm wrong. It's going to be hard for them to turn it on and off. So I think I'm just making sure you're not trying to message me here, Jeff. I think you are frozen for sure. I'm going to shoot you a text. There you go. I'll keep talking. From the time of John Chapman all the way till modern day, the SEALs have been involved in changing narratives by using influence and leverage over their own team members in order to ensure that people are all rowing the boat in the same direction. You know, whether it's I'm going to stay going, and we'll repeat if we need to. From John Chapman to Mark Luttrell with Lone Survivor, to Chris Kyle and his deployment in Ramadi with SEAL Team 3 and Jocko Willink, to Job, to Red Wing, to extortion, and even things like Benghazi. The same patterning, the same methodology and tactics were used to ensure that the story that comes from those events were ones that were favorable for our government, favorable for the Navy and the Navy SEALs, and then didn't implicate anybody of any influence or power within the Navy SEAL power structure, that everybody was sort of clean. And, Rob O'Neill, the Bin Laden raid, hell, I interviewed Rob for 6 hours, and, some people have harder criticisms of Rob than me. I've been hard on him for that raid publicly, only because I was given information directly from members of that raid that is counter to what he has been saying his entire time. But, I told Rob, if he did 400 missions, 399 of them, I think he's a hero. But on Bin Laden, I think he's not telling the complete truth. And that made him a lot of money. And it was a great promotional marketing thing for the United States Navy. And it kept people happy because the world's most hated and wanted man was supposedly dead. And there's a lot of conversations we can have about that, but working off the premise that Bin Laden was there and Bin Laden is dead, how it happened is not, I don't believe, factual as far as what's been told. But that gets Job's case. I'm going to make sure I don't need to jump out of here. You're good. Job's case is just a piece of a puzzle, but it also is, Job was the first one in his, he's one of 10 team commanders. He pushed back on a lot of things. He tried to hold his people accountable. He tried to make sure that the environment his team was working in was beneficial to the team and to the mission. Unfortunately, he was forced to do daylight raids by NSW naval special warfare, because at this point in time they were doing, basically winning the hearts and minds of the community. So working in the dark of night, which is where its special operations make their living, was no longer the approved tactics. And for me, that's a big tell that Job pushed back on that. And he had a couple guys get killed. Matt Cantor. I think you're coming back, Jeff.
On my phone. Because all of a sudden I've lost internet here. So that's really weird because I have a 50-foot tower that I put in especially for this. So obviously you're hitting on sensitive stuff.
It's not the first time this has happened, my friend.
Not for neither of us. So please go ahead.
Job pushed back on the daylight raids, and because he had 2 guys get killed, there were 4 guys killed in the deployment. In the beginning, early on, there was 2 Army guys. They were psychological operations guys that were killed in an ambush by an Afghan national police officer. And then 2 SEALs were killed in November of 2012. Matt Cantor in the beginning of November, and Kevin Eberts in the 3rd week of November. And Job decided that the daylight raids were dangerous and were not worth the risk. And so we stopped sending his guys out. And that prompted the top 3 guys in the East Coast SEALs to fly out to Afghanistan and have words with Job 10 days before he died. And Job was overheard. There was an argument that was overheard coming from Job's room where I believe he was laying out all the shit that had happened on that deployment. There was an Afghan girl that was raped that the locals say was done by members of Job's team. He was investigating a lot of issues, plus the death of his 2 guys and the Army guys. And I think he pushed back on those things. I think he pushed back on the missing money. I think he pushed back on all of it. And I think he was told to toe the line. If you want to continue on the Admiral track, because he was supposed to be leaving in June to go to Rhode Island for a military school, military academy, college, which is like a prerequisite to become on that Admiral track. And I think they pretty much told him if he wants to continue in the path that he had been set up for, that he needs to do the right thing and just shut up and lead his men and deal with it when it, behind closed doors when it gets back to the States. And I know that when they left and went back to the States, it was right around when a Navy SEAL named Nick Check had died, and there was a funeral, and Job's wife went to the funeral and spoke to Tim Szymanski, who was the ops officer in Roberts Ridge and tied to just about every other corrupt act in the SEALs. She saw him and said, "How's my husband doing?" And he said he's crushing it. He's doing a great job. And shortly before Job died, he had had a couple email exchanges and phone calls with his wife, basically saying there's a lot of bad things happening over here that I'm going to have to deal with when I get back. No belief that he was suicidal or that or anything like that. There is zero evidence to this day. There's zero evidence to prove suicide. They have an anecdotal contextual piece where it says that Job was struggling, seemed to be not engaged with his command staff, and wasn't sleeping well, wasn't exercising. And I don't have anything to refute that, so I'll stipulate to that. But the reality is that alone is not a predicate for suicide. There was no letter. There was no search history on his computer. There was no private conversations with a friend or a loved one, nothing. And mind you, this is 3 days before Christmas, and he had a 9-year-old daughter at home and was 6 months from collecting his pension. He had 19 and a half years in when he died.
Wow.
So, there's so many counters to that aren't even evidentiary, but just contextual, like the depression part, that you would argue, if you're going to tell me he was depressed, I'm going to argue that he had a 9-year-old. It was Christmas time, and he was supposed to go to a war college in Rhode Island, and he was 6 months from pension. So they kind of wash each other out. So when you do that, there's no evidence whatsoever that Job committed suicide.
No, and you should see a run-up. You should see behavior indicative of problems, drinking or whoring or swearing or something.
Yeah, and there was, I mean, other than him struggling with the magnitude of what was happening, not the overwhelmingness of the events and how he couldn't cope with it, just trying to figure a way to be the right leader at the right time, to do the right things, to make sure that he gets his team through this deployment with all the crap that had happened. And again, there's the guy that the SEAL Team 6 guy that took the $40,000 was confronted 2 days before Job died, and 2 days later Job's dead. And I believe he's the one that was directly involved in Job's death. And I can't say his name.
What's his name?
Yeah, I can't say his name. I wish I could, only because I don't have direct evidence to prove that he was the one that did it. I do know that Jeff Peeler did what he did because it's in all the documents. However,
that's the chief.
That's the command master chief, and it's ironic. It's whatever the word is. I don't know whether or not anything bad happened to him, but I can tell you that a week after I went on Redacted, Jeff Peeler was found dead of a heart attack. And I named him publicly on Redacted. And I don't know if he had a heart attack or if something else happened to him. I can just tell you, it seems very odd to me, timing-wise, that I go on a national podcast and name him as a conspirator in cover-up and criminality of what happened post-murder, that he's then dead. And he would have been a great person if we were ever to take this to court to subpoena and question under oath, because he refused to talk to me at any point in time. Everything I gleaned was from FOIAs and evidence and documents I was able to obtain through alternative methods.
And so the motive, the speculative motive now was the endemic systemic corruption that was authorized to be covered up by the SEAL chain of command and backed by the Navy chain of command. Is that a correct summation?
It appears to be so, yes. And again,
so immediately the pattern analysis there is that's exactly what happened with Lone Survivor.
Oh, 100%. Everything. Literally, they have not changed their pattern since Roberts Ridge with John Chapman. I mean, they've perfected it, but the blueprint on how to control a narrative and change the outcome of quote unquote the outcome by spinning things and altering evidence and destroying evidence and getting blackmail on people and things of that nature. They've been doing that the entire time.
And there's also Chris Kyle too.
Yep. I mean, listen, I wish, I mean, I know that there are people looking deeply into some events surrounding Chris Kyle that have not been made public that would be damning to him.
There's some Marines that have come forward, I believe.
Yeah, but I mean, even bigger than that. I actually, that was part of my whistleblower group that came out and talked about that deployment with Jocko and, you know, the rogue nature of that deployment and how lethal they were with and haphazard they were with who they shot and all that. Like, there was a lot of innocent civilians shot for fun during that deployment, not just by Chris Kyle, but by many guys.
That's what I heard. And I think this goes to the fact that civilians don't know this, but Special Forces, Green Berets, primary job, so there's two jobs. They don't call it this anymore, but FID, Foreign Internal Development at peacetime, that's what I did. In unconventional warfare, I think they call it irregular warfare now in wartime. But you're really teachers and trainers. So the human rapport is very important. That's not so with the SEALs. The SEALs are really about raids, short raids, and there is no real tradition in my mind. Not that they don't do training, they do, you know, but there isn't that tradition. And Delta originally came from an SF tradition. Those cultures in my mind, are very different cultures, even up to Delta and Dev. Does that make sense to you? No, am I frozen here now? Well, no, I'm not frozen on my end, but
There we go. We're back.
there we go. Wow. This is really something.
Yeah, I had the other morning, just for shits and giggles to have a conversation. The day after or 2 days after the print edition came out in the Washington Post, which we haven't even talked about yet.
I've got that right here. Yes.
Before we cut off, I'll lead that in, and then we can discuss that. In
Definitely.
2022, in December of 22, I had hit a wall with exposure. Like, I was hitting podcasts, but I was basically talking to the same audience on a bunch of different podcasts. And I felt like it wasn't getting the traction it needed. So I leveraged the relationship that I had at Fox and asked for an introduction to Pete, knowing full well that Pete was entrenched with Navy SEALs, that his best friends were some of the worst SEALs. I knew this, but I figured if I could just show him the evidence, he would believe me. So we had a conversation. I forwarded him all the evidence that I had at the time, every photo I had, every report, every statement. And he agreed that there's no way that, based on the photographs and the evidence that I reviewed, that Job could have committed suicide. That there was that he also believed that after seeing the photo. And I just asked him what he saw in this photo. And he said a suppressor was used. And then he was supposed to help me get some exposure on Fox News and other outlets, and it turned into a big nothing burger. He got me nothing. And then in April of 23, his last text to me was, "I'm sorry I couldn't do more for you. If I'm ever in a position to help in the future, I will." And that was the last text I ever got from him. That was April 23. And I have 3 years of emails, texts, and voicemails that I've left him on his personal cell and personal Gmail that never got responded to. And I know for a fact people on my behalf have spoken to him since he's been Secretary of War, who are in his network, who I trust, and he's done nothing. And to me, that was something that I didn't want to have to utilize as leverage. I really wanted Pete Hegseth to do the right thing. I wanted him to take what he had told me, what he believed, which is Joe was murdered, and then fix it when he had the position to do so when he became Secretary of Defense /War. And he didn't. And I made the decision that, I tried talking to some conservative media outlets and they didn't want any parts of it. I said, listen, I called an independent journalist that had a relationship with the Washington Post. And I'd talked to her on another story she did for me briefly about Job. And she calls me in late December, early January of this year and says, "Hey, I'd like to talk about Job's case." And I explained to her that, I have this information. I didn't tell her what it was. I said, but if I release it, it's really my only ace in the hole. And that if I'm going to do it, it's got to be big. It's got to hit large swaths of people who will be enraged by this. And she said, okay. And she pitched it to the Washington Post and they said yes. And it took 6 months to get this thing to print. But I released all the text messages I had with Pete, every email I had with Pete, notes from my conversations with Pete. And then in addition to that, people don't know this, or maybe they do, but Donald Trump, before he was ever Donald Trump, the politician, he was Donald Trump, the real estate mogul executive guy, and his sons, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, both attended, at the time, a very prestigious all-boys school outside of Philadelphia called the Hill School, which is in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, where I grew up and where Job grew up. And Job's father, Harry, was a teacher and lacrosse coach at the Hill School and ultimately retired as the associate headmaster after like 40 years working there. And he taught both the boys and coached Don Jr. And he had maintained a relationship with Don from the time he graduated until Trump was running for president in 2015. And Harry, at this point in time, was convinced that that's Job's father. He was convinced that Job didn't kill himself and had some information that he believed point to something other than suicide. And he wrote a letter to Don Jr. and said, hey, take a look at this. I don't think my son killed himself. And Don wrote, yeah, there's a lot of things that stand out in that I think need to be looked at. And if my dad is ever in a position to be able to help you, I will make sure it gets done. And then nothing. He got ghosted. And I know for a fact that Don Jr. is also very entrenched in the Navy SEAL community, and that a lot of his friends, quote unquote friends, are some of the most prominent, well-known Navy SEALs. And it's not a far-fetched to think that, you know, the son of one of the most not known faces in the world, Donald Trump, would be someone people would want to hang out with and have access to. I believe that 100%. But the reality is that both Pete Hegseth and Don Trump Jr. were encapsulated by Navy SEALs. And if you don't think for one second that the same tactics
and the public perception in SOCOM, the public perception is still really SEALs, not SF, and 6, not CAG. Although inside the community, it's exactly the opposite.
The leverage, listen,
Hegseth,
the leverage is real. How they use that leverage isn't just amongst SEALs, it's amongst politicians. Listen, the SEALs have been interested in politics in our country since the 80s, and probably before that. There are, you know, Tim Szymanski, who I mentioned earlier, he was born and raised in Wilmington. He was a family friend of the Bidens growing up. He was directly connected to Hillary Clinton. He was directly connected to everybody. They are power brokers. They are great at ensuring that the information that they obtain through whatever tactics and techniques they use is something that they can utilize later when they need to have leverage over somebody.
And they aren't the first, like the Marines stand out for, you know, public affairs, because anytime there's a movie, the Marines will support it because the Marines want that image. You know, they want those uniforms. They want that out there, you know, and God bless the Marines for that. But the Marines aren't covering up serial criminality is the difference. The Marines are just promoting the Marines, you know, which is cool. Where the Army, like you see Army movies and the Army is, you know, not even aware. But in what we're saying here, I think, is the same thing, is Big Navy and SEAL culture are often covering this up. Is that
100%.
right? Do you agree?
It goes from it's from the top, though. I mean, look at Bill McRaven, you know, the make your bed guy, retired admiral, head of Naval Special Warfare. He is a very well-known public figure. You know, I would argue that he knows every piece of criminality that's occurred in the last 20 some years. And he was also potentially going to be Hillary Clinton's running mate at one point in time in 2016. These people are very, very, very connected. There is nothing, there isn't a single, it looks like you're,
so I'm going to leave here. I'm not sure how I do that. Let me mute this. Okay. Is that working? No.
Let me see. There we go.
All right. Okay. I'm
the Navy is, you know, people like Bill McRaven, who is, you know, Tim Szymanski is directly involved in. Rob O'Neill, he's the one that says Rob O'Neill killed Bin Laden. Like that, that
just came out as Rob O'Neill. Like, yeah, I lied about that, and that's, you know. Plus, there's this. It's like housewives or something. They're all bad mouthing each other all the time now as well.
Well, that's survivability, and that's for their piece of in the hierarchy, right? Because it was Jocko Willink was for a long time the guy that everybody looked to. He had the echelon front, his, you know, extreme ownership, extreme leadership, all the stuff he was doing. He wrote, quote unquote, wrote a kid's book that he just sold to Chris Pratt's movie group for $84 million or something like that. I know for a fact he didn't write a single word of that children's book series, but he was the beacon of Navy SEAL stardom. And then you had the lower guys who they may have notoriety, but they didn't have the money or the power to influence. When Mark Luttrell, then Chris Kyle, then Rob O'Neill, and now you have guys like Andy Stump and Mike Ritland and Sean Ryan. That's Sean Ryan, the multinational drug dealer.
People don't know he was dealing drugs. He admits it.
In like 5 or 6 countries in Latin America, in South or Central America, depending on.
Which means he was an international drug dealer, which means pretty significant connections in SOCOM and cartel. And then all of a sudden he pops up, So, and your take is do you think he's reformed now, or
no?
You don't think he's reformed? Yeah.
No, he is no different than Jocko, no different than any of the other SEALs who are in prominence now. They're all positioning for their piece in the hierarchy, because Jocko's going out to pasture, selling that book he didn't write to the movie rights to it was his walk away. His podcast has not been relevant since Sean Ryan got elevated to the #1 podcast.
What about Stump? I haven't really paid that much attention to him.
Stump?
Yeah.
Andy is a guy that very intelligent. I think he has conflicted loyalties because he's very close with Jocko. And I think there is an element of the Jocko versus Sean Ryan, not in a hating each other, but in a power struggle for who's going to be the #1 dog. And I think people are aligning themselves with the one that they feel is the horse they're going to be able to carry themselves along with to get to where they believe they want to go to as far as their fame and power and financial gain. So listen, I think they are all, I don't think there's very few guys that are public that are well known that don't have monster skeletons in their closet.
Oh yeah, and somebody's saying Jocko and Juan O'Sullivan. Yeah, Jocko and Juan O'Sullivan are just not even anybody. They're not serious at all. Nobody serious takes them. But there's a reason why guys like me have been around a long time. And now, admittedly, I don't have the background that a dev guy does, but I certainly have the background that a Sean Ryan does. I can tell you, I remember watching a Sean Ryan show where some guy goes, yeah, they said something about USAPs. And he's like, what's a USAP? And the Intel guy goes, I don't know what a USAP is. And Sean, well, that's an unacknowledged special access program. I mean, and I'm like, well, you ain't the spook shit that you say you are if you don't know that term.
Yeah, there's people don't recognize that. You look at Jocko, we'll just talk about him real quick. He was one of his early, when he first started, because MMA is a big conduit for all of this.
I don't know if you heard my entry, but I was just talking about, I was so upset with the birthday UFC where the color guards, the honor guards are standing up for the UFC and MMA guys. And I was making a comparison between Hulk Hogan and Audie Murphy. There's a huge difference between competition and combat. And there's no such thing as combat sports. Doesn't exist.
It's the BJJ, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world that started, probably late 90s in the special operations community, where guys started transitioning their training from one other type of training to now the mixed martial arts world. And there's no, the goal of combat is not to get into a ground fight with somebody. That's not the goal. Exactly. Your combatives should be, how do I avoid that? Now, you should have stuff that happened that you learn if you do get into it, but it should not be the focus.
No, so my combatives program, I get book and videos used to sell in AFI stores, trained over 17,000, sometimes as units as big as 600 at a time for GWAT at Camp Shelby. And now they sold the BJJ stuff where you take off your boots, take off your blouse and roll around on a mat, which is exactly the opposite of what I was teaching. And anybody And the SOP
Anybody
mod
of credibility.
the fifth group guy does a real good SOP mod program too. But it was sold. It was not that it's bad in itself for what it is, but it's not the answer to everything. It's just that they arranged Bill Wallace. I don't know if you go back far enough, if you're old enough, but I know who Superfoot Bill Wallace was. Is they had him at the first BJJ event as a referee because he was a big name, Superfoot in karate, and BJJ's winning. He's like, well, sure, you're winning. The rules are totally for BJJ. The rules were totally against anything else. So yeah, in that scenario, it worked. And then some Japanese guy, I forget his name, the Gracie Killer, came along and beat them all just because he wouldn't play their games anymore.
Well, I mean, the evolution of MMA has become a big money market, right? You look at who's behind UFC. You look at the money people behind UFC. You look at their political connections to Israel and the United States, and then you look at Jocko. One of his first investors, one of his first partners, was a former mob guy, Joey Menino, who was got convicted of selling Quaaludes, and he was one of Jocko's first partners when he started, after he got out of SEALs and started moving in that direction with the MMA gyms. And that was probably, I don't have the exact date, but late 90s, early 2000s. Probably mid 2000s. And then 10 to 12 years later, one of the guys that worked for him at his gym in San Diego was a hitman for the cartel. So it's you can't make this shit up. It's the realities is that there's a lot of guys that there are very few guys of prominence in special operations, especially Navy SEALs, who aren't directly tied to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA.
And I think there's an analogy to be made between the BJJ guys' attitude, combative attitude, and hey, let's get in the ring with the SEALs attitude too, as well. I think that because so I've been in martial arts since 1967, and I've trained in Japan, and I've trained with all kinds. I've trained with some good MMA guys, some good BJJ guys. Most of the time, and I've had some legends and giants on the show. I've had Chad Ball once, the Green Beret who wouldn't shoot the kids in the first Gulf War. Said, no, we're going to fight this out, and did, and won. I've had on Vince McKellar, ODA 595, one of the original horse soldiers, and lots of badass martial artists, badass, soldiers. And you know what? They're always nice and polite and respectful.
Until they're not.
They're not this, bellicose, hey, let's get in the ring and let's find out if your stuff's real or, but with the SEALs and with the BJJ guys, that seems to be more standard.
I mean, I don't know if you know Dale Comstock, correct? Oh, you're frozen. Damn you, CIA. I'll tell the Dale Comstock story in a second. See if we can get you back. So Dale Comstock, back, and I don't know the exact date, but there was a unapproved, unauthorized MMA fight that was supposed to happen between Tim Szymanski from SEAL Team 6 at the time. He was the head of SEAL Team 6, and Dale Comstock, who was a Delta Force operator, legendary. And it was billed as this SEAL Team 6 versus Delta Force. And let me see what you said there, Jeff. Hold on. SEAL Team 6 versus Delta Force. And it ultimately got canceled because Tim Szymanski tested positive. Supposedly, I don't know this for a fact, but Dale has spoken about this, that he tested positive for herpes. So the fight was canceled, and there was a lot of anger within NSW and, quite frankly, in JSOC over the fact that they were going to do this. And but that was before MMA stuff. That was one of the first. It's like the genesis of how this idea of Navy SEALs turning to MMA and jiu-jitsu to become profitable, to become famous, A, and B, to make money. So that's a huge, it's a big part of the motivation for why the SEALs are corrupt, is because they're able to utilize moments that they, supposedly did great things in, turns out they didn't, to then create fame and fortune and use MMA, UFC, and other avenues as ways to make money and promote themselves and grow their audiences and podcasting and all the stuff that comes from it. So that's typically an angle that I like to discuss, because there is a financial component to this. Getting involved with everybody in special operations, either involved with coffee or cigars or bourbon, all of them. There's got to be a reason why they're all doing the same thing. And I don't know if there's enough money from customers to support it, but I'm sure there's a lot of money from backers or people that want to keep them happy or to elevate their personal profile. I'm sure they'll throw some money at stuff like that. So just find it odd that there's so many cigars and coffee and bourbon guys within special operations. I feel like I should be doing some sort of a stand-up gig here while we're waiting for the CIA to stop messing with Jeff's feed here. And I'm assuming I'm talking to somebody who's actually watching and not just to myself. But the Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump stuff, I'll go back to that. When the story came out, on Saturday was digital, not this past weekend, the weekend before. And then Sunday, front page print edition in the Washington Post. I had hoped, and this is how I know the system, the swamp, whatever, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, doesn't have a party and doesn't have any angle other than power, is that I put out information that the Washington Post thought was going to be big enough to put it on the front page. And while the digital did 200,000 in the first day as far as views, and I don't know how many newspapers were sold on the Sunday edition, but I'm sure it's a lot. Not one single news source, liberal or conservative, reached out to the reporter or me. None. Not CNN, MSNBC, any of the legacy media, certainly none of the conservative media. And other than some groups on social media to pick it up and cover and write about it. And, the Drudge Report was just reprints, Yahoo News. They're not doing a story on it. They're just repurposing the same story onto their website. Nobody picked it up. And to me, that was shocking. Like, when I look back on this and I thought what I thought an outcome would be, one of the outcomes I thought it would be is it would piss off the people that didn't like Trump and Hegseth. And that would create enough fervor and enough attention and enough pressure for a conversation to be had with Hegseth and the administration about Job's case. Or little black helicopters and black vans showed up and arrested me. Like, I thought there was going to be something that came from it, and nothing came from it, which tells me that there is very little, there's no sides. It's their club and we're not in it. And I think that's the reality of it. It's all theater. There is no left-wing media. It's just media. And everybody plays a role and everybody agrees to their role. And I think that's just the way it is. That's just, I don't have proof of that. That's just how I feel about it. Just through experience and watching how things unfold, and in the big picture, how does it end up looking? And the fact that the SEALs can be through every administration since, Bush 1, deeply entrenched in there and still stay in power, regardless of whether or not you have a far right, quote unquote, far right administration, or Obama or Biden. They were all deeply entrenched, never left power. And that just tells me that there is no real sides. Everything is about power and control. And the media is just a voice to keep people at odds. That's all it is. Let me text you, Jeff, see if you want me to keep just babbling. Should I keep talking? And this isn't the first time that I've had, when I was interviewing Rob O'Neill, our feed went wacky several times. And I will keep talking, Jeff. Especially during key moments of a conversation. I believe, do I think my phones are tapped? Or I think they know who I am, and I think they know where I live. And, I think there are probably key words that are said that are intercepted. Listen, my job was signals intelligence. I was a cryptanalyst, and so everything was intercepted electronic communications. So I understand how the NSA works. I understand the fact that all things are collected thanks to the Patriot Act and stored and aren't supposed to be listened to if you're an American citizen unless you say certain things or talk about certain things. They've got Jeffrey coming back.
I am
there
back.
He is. Man, the myth, the legend.
I apologize, Matt,
no.
to the audience, but I will find out. But I've never had this much interference before.
Well, listen, it's a good thing I like to talk.
I don't think they like what you're saying, obviously, because you're indicting the big Navy and the SEAL community, but both of us have seen that as a reality for a long time.
And I've had a lot of people come at me and say that, why did you put basically doxing HEGSETH and Trump? And I'm like, well, I sat on it for 3 years. This wasn't like I got you in a gotcha moment, and then I went out and shopped it. That's not, number one, I'm getting paid nothing for any of this. Never have, never will. But I lost hope in their ability to ever do anything about it. And the only other option I had, which was other than holding onto it and doing nothing, which is never really an option for me, is in order to try to advance the ball forward was to create enough anger on the left and people that are disenfranchised with Trump on the right and HEGSETH, and have them get behind Job's case, get behind his murder, and say, why is it that this brave SEAL commander, his death isn't worth anyone caring? And that's what I was hoping was going to happen. And it may still, but I can tell you the reaction of the story, even though I know it got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views and exposure, did nothing as far as creating any type of fervor on either side.
Mark Bauer, have you talked to him, author of Black Hawk Down and also Not a Good Day to Die?
I have not, no.
Because he was one of the first to expose Slab and everyone. Or also, no, it's not. It's Relentless Strike, JSOC's history. Is that Mark Bauer? Is that the author I'm thinking of?
I didn't see that. I didn't read that book. Now I'm not, newsflash, I'm not a reader. I wrote a book, but I'm not a big reader. I like to witness things firsthand and experience them through conversation, but I'll take your word for it. But I will reach out to him.
Yeah. Relentless Strike. His first book is Not a Good Day to Die, which is about Tucker Gar, much more in depth, and actually exposes Dev quite a bit. And there's also another scene in there where there's a green, orange, and blue guy who have to go over in a snowstorm, a mountaintop, and the blue guy is complaining all the time. He can do it, but he's complaining. So the next time they got to go, the orange and green guy just leave the blue guy. And also, I won't attribute this, but I know that there were blue guys left in base camps because they could not hump the mountains. They were all gym babies, all kinds of muscles. But you start humping those mountains, that's a kind of a different physique as well. It's more like the Ranger physique, a lean, tough physique. But I guess we're getting too far afield. But so I want to thank you for staying with me and coming back on. And where can people get your book and follow you besides on X?
I wrote a book back in 2006 about my life with my brother. It's a memoir. It's my brother and our relationship through my eyes. My brother was autistic, special needs, and stuttered, and unfortunately died in 1989 in a car accident. So it's just a book about our life together. It's called A Brother's Love, a memoir. You can find it on Amazon. There isn't a whole lot left for anybody to do, unless you were there in Job's team and you want to talk to me. There isn't much I need to know now. Now, if you want to admit that you killed Job, please email me at matt@mattkubbler.com. I'd be more than happy to take your confession. But for the most part, I got this case locked up. I just need the Navy. So write your congressman, your senator, reach out to the Department of Defense, NCIS, Department of Navy, voice your concern over the fact that nothing's being done about Job's case. And I will say this, Jeff, just for your audience. While I am 100% confident in my investigative skills and what I've uncovered, I would urge the United States Navy and NCIS to reopen the case, reevaluate the evidence that was available when it happened, what happened with that evidence, procedurally, were procedures followed, and was there culpability on how evidence was manipulated and destroyed, A, and then B, once you analyze that and decide whether or not, based on today's eyes, looking at something that was already been done, can you, as an investigative agency or an oversight committee in that agency, determine suicide? And if you can't, then reopen the case, have new forensic people come in, your own people. They're not going to use my people. I know that. Use your own. I don't give a shit. I know what the forensic evidence is. It's not something that's interpretive, really. It's pretty much cut and dry. Reevaluate everything. Look at all new evidence. Listen to my stuff. Talk about it. Say we don't believe any of his shit. I don't care. But I guarantee you, at the end of that, they will know that Joe was murdered. And
go ahead.
And let me just add this real quick. We are not, as a family, that Job's family, his wife, his sister, and anyone else that's involved in this from a personal standpoint, I don't have a goal other than to do whatever it is they ask me to do. Like I don't have that direct connection to Job as far as that real personal, he was my best friend, I'll do anything for my brother kind of thing. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because they asked me and his dad asked me and I made a promise to his dad. And that's just a kind of how I look at that. And I have an ego.
In effect, she's a Gold Star mom.
Yes. A Gold Star sister and wife. Yes.
And there's nothing we won't do for Gold Star moms.
Yep. And for me, their goal has always been, they've never changed from this since the day we started. They understand that the realities are they're never going to find out who did it and there's never going to be justice. They understand that. But what they want is the honor and dignity and legacy of Job Price to be restored, and that the manner of death be changed from suicide to homicide. Now, there is a plan B.
That affects benefits. That affects a lot
100%. Oh, yeah.
Discharge.
And plan B is undetermined.
Yes.
If they go to undetermined, it does the same thing.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess, well, thank you. I would wrap up by saying, the cover up in the SEAL community of this culture of criminality and corruption is parallel to the greater Israelists, and that's not working anymore. And it's going to fail for the SEALs as well. Especially, I think the turning point will probably be Howard's movie coming out, but it's already starting to happen. And so we're not, and I'm certainly not, I'm sure you aren't indicting every SEAL and the entire SEAL community. I worked with SEAL Team 4 quite a bit. Some great guys, I know other ones, Jason Redmond, some very humble, good. But what they are doing is they're really, by covering all this up, they're covering up an infection, and it's just going to make things worse in the long run.
Well, I'll say this: I agree 100% that this is not a SEAL-wide problem. I have dozens of SEALs behind the scenes that are supporting me, that have given me information, that have provided me with intelligence that I didn't otherwise have or would have no access to, who all want what you just said, for the corruption and the taint on their beloved brotherhood and their organization to be removed, have the cancer cut out, so they can go back to being proud of the unit that they serve or served.
But the problem is those guys don't come forward, though.
And there's going to be. I think the tide is changing.
Yeah. No, I think it is too. I think the inflection point is Howard's movie.
And I think you're going to see some people as that becomes public knowledge, the movie, and as the trailers come out and reviews of the movie and
the discussions. Yes,
there's going to be a lot more that come out that I already know want to come out, but everything is timing, right? I've learned nothing. If I didn't learn anything, I learned that timing is everything in this process.
That's right. And
I haven't always been right with my timing, but I've been good for the most part with it. And I think that, and I'm proud, and this is a pat me on the back moment, but I believe that I was one of the original, lack of a better term, whistleblowers when it comes to exposing Navy SEAL corruption. And
definitely,
I'm very proud of that. And this isn't about me. I am a nobody in that world. I'm a guy that's got a bone, and I'm not letting it go when it comes to Job's case. But if that means I've got to expose other things, I expose it. And I think there's going to be so many more. We had, Eric Deming come out, and the two Marines that came out, and there's a lot of guys that want to come forward, and they're just waiting on the right time. And I think that right time is coming.
I've been trying to get Eric on for quite some time, and for some reason we don't connect.
He hasn't done much in a while as far as podcasts. I know he was hot and heavy there for a bit, but he hasn't done a whole lot lately that I know of.
But I also have seen inside the community, inside JSOC, particularly with Delta guys, there's been a lot of counter, even official reports that are still classified to SEAL reports. That's a whole nother. Have you seen that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so that's another. So again, we've always known the SEALs had problems inside the community, but outside the community, civilians think the SEALs are the shit, just like the FBI is the shit and the CIA's the shit. But that, I'm saying that's going to shift, and that's going to shift with the Howard movie on Alone at Dawn at Chapman. And the best thing to do is, get rid of the infection now for the good of the SEALs, for the Navy, for SOCOM, for JSOC, all of that. Plus, it's the right thing to do.
You would think the right thing to do thing would be the overriding moral compass, but it's not, unfortunately.
The majority of Tier 1 guys I've worked with been honored to be taught by or trained, or these are the kind of guys that pray before meals like we do. High moral standards. I think this is the exception. I guess I want to close with that and see if you agree with that.
Yeah, I do. I agree that while it seems big because it's new, the amount of corruption within the Navy SEAL community in comparison to the overall Navy SEAL population, it is a small number. And that, I think that if I'm speaking directly to Navy SEALs, current and past, who did their job with honor and dignity and distinction, and want to be treated with respect for who they are, and who they were when they were Navy SEALs, I believe you are worthy of that. And but I also believe that at some point in time, I have no skin in the game on this. That at some point in time, people with skin in the game are going to have to do the hard thing. Not when the heavy lifting's all done. It's easy to get on board when the heavy lifting's done, But when there's still some obstacles to overcome, that's when we're going to need you guys to come forward and tell your story. And, it doesn't have to be firsthand knowledge, because that is one thing that is a default mechanism within the special operations community is I wasn't there.
Yeah, that's what they all say. Yeah.
And at some point in time, everybody was there, right? But everybody was there.
It's a cultural thing too, because I'll tell you, one of the most interesting things I ever saw was support personnel that hosted both blue and green, and CAG cleaned up after themselves. This is not me. This is people I've talked to, and Dev left a mess. And the same thing with, I think this was Dale talking about this, maybe, is CAG really admired and appreciated their intelligence officers like me, and Dev looked down on them like second class. But there's the guys who we fall asleep at our desk, wake up, and they're going to sleep during the day, raiding at night. But the intel guys, it's just like Leighton in Midway, going home and pouring over maps. I said, that's the job. Just those little traits. I think it's a cultural thing that has to change. Just like Israel is going to have to change, as I talked about at the beginning of the podcast. They can't just keep this racial superiority attitude that they have. It's going to destroy them. And it's going to destroy the SEALs anyway.
I agree.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much, Matt. And I also see all your cool farm stuff on Facebook happening. I'm right there with you.
We're not far from each other. One day we're going to have to get together for breakfast or something.
We will. We'll have to do that. Yeah, because I just got my new house, or we're rebuilt after the fire and everything. So have to have you guys over, you and your fam over. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And hang in there with it. I'm glad to get you back on. I'm glad you're still holding on to that bone. For the family, I know that personally from similar situations, how they must get solace from your effort, where they don't get a lot of solace elsewhere. And I don't know if you hear that much.
I want to end with one thing, and people have accused me of being a grifter and trying to take advantage of a family that lost a loved one in war and yada, yada, yada. There's clearly plenty of evidence to prove otherwise. However, Harry Price had offered to pay me. And he said, anything I can give you, I'm going to give you. And I said, I don't want anything, because I don't sell hope. I'm not going to have you pay me for the hope that I might be able to be successful in proving that Job didn't kill himself. And I think that speaks to my moral character and my belief systems, and that there needs to be more people who are working because it's the right thing to do, not because there's a financial benefit for it. And selling hope is always wrong.
Yep. But, the guy that can't be intimidated or bought off, but only killed, is the most powerful guy on the planet and the scariest guy to the corrupt. And I think we're both in that category.
Yes, sir.
Well, thanks, Matt. And keep up the good work, and God bless.
See you, brother.
All right. Well, we made that happen. It's the most difficult I have had in a long time. I don't think they liked a lot of that coming out, because I don't know why my system, which is very robust, I got a 50-foot tower to make sure I have good comms. But anyway, I hope you will like, share, and subscribe this. If no other reason, then they don't want you to as well. And so here's the deep state's SOP for sabotaging spirit: divert, distract, and disrupt via dumps of false flags interspersed with truth. That's probably the UFC FBI thing. Theories with conspiracies, and proofs with propaganda. Inundating with interrogatories, while never confirming nor denying. This is what Joe Kent said as well. So nothing is binary. No black and white, no male and female, and especially no good or evil, or God or Satan. But just see how many times you've heard the name Jesus or Yeshua on TV. You won't. They will cut it off. Just an endless sea of anything going gray. Without a moral straight edge, you can't see the crooked. Looking for a spiritual compass, without a spiritual compass, we are easily lost in satanic swamps. So exit their net and drop their freak. Instead of talking, singing, and praising and reading to God all the time, try shutting up and listening. Stand to raise your antenna. When we talk, we send. But when sending, you can't receive. Release the send button. Become still and listen for God.